This video is brought to you by Thorum. Stick around to the end to learn how you can get 20% off incredible rings made out of everything from meteorite to World War II rifle stocks. Well after the guns had been fired and a wife was left to widowhood, the trial began, and the defense recounted. It happened in an evil hour in the month of April 1845 that Mr. Seton made the acquaintance of Mr. and Mrs. Hawkey. James Seton, a rather portly man of independent means, was himself married, and yet amidst the gilded soirees and pageantry of the Victorian age, he found himself taken with Mrs. Isabella Hawkey, the wife of Lieutenant Henry Hawkey of the Royal Marines. Seton, having himself retired after an unremarkable stint in the military, possessed ample time over the course of the coming weeks to visit Mrs. Hawkey at her residence while her husband was away on duty. His advances took first the form of courteous and innocuous gestures, escorting the lady on a walk or lending her a peculiar book, until one day he dared to speak the unspoken. "It's no use humbugging with you any longer. Do you mean to give me an opportunity or not?" He would not, he told Mrs. Hawkey, risk his life for nothing, for Lieutenant Hawkey was liable to learn of Seton's designs upon his wife, and for centuries the elites of Europe had mediated disputes over women, insults, and other slights to one's honor by means of the duel. Whereas the medieval age had formalized trial by combat, the Renaissance raised notions of chivalric duty and etiquette. Thus, the early modern gentleman became honor-bound to descend from time to time the steps of his high mansion in order to oblige cruel custom, to meet shame with steel. The object of the formal duel was not principally to kill, but for a man to gain so-called satisfaction by displaying his willingness to die for his honor. Sword duels sometimes concluded after drawing first blood, but England had abandoned the sword for the pistol, and provided a duelist hit his mark, death was common. Even as monarchs outlawed the duel, and the church and thinkers of the Enlightenment derided the custom as egotistical butchery, the practice persisted into the 19th century, punished softly by the courts and preserved with vigor among the ranks of military men. A knock came at the door. Seton panicked, thinking it was Mr. Hawkey. Instead, it was the young Lieutenant Edward Pym, a comrade of Mr. Hawkey's. Rumor was likely to reach Lieutenant Hawkey, but Seton was not deterred. The next time he met Isabella, he attempted to give her a ring, proposed that they go away together to London, and renounced his love for his own wife. Isabella would insist that she remained politely aloof to Seton until the night of May 19th, when another ball was held. Seton insisted that Isabella share a dance with him. Lieutenant Hawkey cordially allowed it, but after their dance, Seton sat next to her and refused to give up his seat to Lieutenant Hawkey, who then demanded, "Sir, I should like to have a few private words with you." The two went into a side room, and after some argument, Seton emerged dubiously claiming that he, as a former cavalryman, could not duel a Royal Marine. So Hawkey forced the matter. In full view of the ballroom, he attempted to kick Seton, called him a scoundrel and a blackguard, and promised to horsewhip Seton if he refused to fight. The following morning, a man arrived at the Hawkey's residence. Participants in a duel would appoint and act through representatives called seconds, and here was Seton's with a formal challenge. A second was to attempt to reconcile the matter by apology or other means, but this having failed with Hawkey, he was then compelled to arrange and oversee the duel. The place and hour were agreed upon, and the man went away. Hawkey appointed Pym as his second, who at 21 was considerably young for such a task. Hawkey trusted him nevertheless. The two set out and purchased a pair of hair-trigger pistols of fine workmanship. The harbor had assumed a dour and oppressive gray quality in the afternoon, and through formless fog the two sailed across it and went on foot to a pebbled and secluded beach, where they met Seton and his second. A rather sizable distance of 15 paces was agreed upon. The seconds explained the rules, and each, in turn, handed a pistol to his duelist. The men stood silent. The command to fire rang out, The triggers were pulled, Hawkey's gun failed to discharge, and Seton shot at him and missed. Lieutenant Pym might have mistakenly handed Hawkey his gun at half-cock, a safety mechanism. At any rate, both men had proven their courage, and satisfaction should have been gained. And yet, it was said that Hawkey demanded another round with his enemy. Any respectable second would have rejected the notion as barbaric, but the men were handed their remaining pistols. Again came the command to fire. Seton missed and Hawkey shot him through the hip. He collapsed and blood surged from his ruptured artery. Lieutenant Hawkey reportedly stood unaffected, said, "I'm off to France," and fled. Whether Hawkey and Pym indeed escaped to France or to local hideouts was not known. The writhing Seton was dragged into a bed at the Quebec Hotel, where doctors tended to him for days. The renowned surgeon Robert Liston arrived from London and performed an excruciating surgery on a fully awake Seton, cutting through his swollen hip and groin to tie off the artery. Nevertheless, the wound festered, and 2 weeks after the duel, Seton died. Pym was brought to trial for assisting murder. The defense explained to the jury that duels, though widely denounced in contemporary society, answered to an old code of honor by which all were called upon, nay, compelled to measure their actions, unless the individual was prepared to sacrifice all that made his life worth having. The judge reminded all that tired tradition had no bearing on English law, which regarded a fatal duel as premeditated murder. The jury did not leave the box. After a few minutes, they declared Pym not guilty. When Hawkey was brought before the court 3 months later, the jury took only seconds to find him not guilty. 6 years later, Isabella engaged in a sordid affair with one Lieutenant Swain. Henry Hawkey might then have wondered whether his wife had invited, or at least unduly entertained, the lecherous advances of the late Mr. Seton years before. The now Captain Hawkey was tormented by reports of his wife's infidelity and remarked, "What is to be done? I have already on this account sent a fellow creature before his God, and am I to do it again?" The last fatal duel on English soil would take place this same year between French expatriates over an insult about an ex-girlfriend. Dueling had all but vanished from English society. Hawkey merely forbade Swain to continue visiting his wife in his absence. And while Hawkey was walking with Isabella one day, Swain approached, greeted his wife, and made a dismissive comment toward him. Hawkey beat him with a cane. Both were arrested and court-martialed, Swain for treating a superior officer with contempt. Both were acquitted. Isabella soon after separated from Henry Hawkey. Estranged from his wife and children, he died of tuberculosis in 1859 at the age of 38. Isabella remarried to a man 11 years her junior. The defense counsel at the trial of Pym had noted that she was a lady of great personal attractions, one whose beauty was once the theme of every tongue. So coveted were her affections, and so self-righteously bellicose were her suitors, that Seton and Hawkey had engaged in a fight, which would stand as the last fatal duel between Englishmen in the country. I recently picked up the Apollo ring from Thorum, and it might be the coolest thing that I own. It has this really sleek, ancient look, and it's made out of modern hammered black and rose gold tungsten carbide. I'm interested in the full glory of the past, and Thorum handcrafts rings that speak to that part of me. Whether you're looking for a wedding or anniversary band, or just an awesome ring with a cool story behind it, Thorum has it. The World War II ring is gunmetal gray, and the interior is from an M1 Garand that saw active duty in World War II. And the Thor ring has this cool Viking vibe, but it's also partially made out of the 4 billion-year-old Gibeon meteorite. Every ring ships in one business day, arrives in a beautiful box with a silicone activity band, and if it's not your thing, there's a 1-year no questions asked warranty. So whether you need a wedding ring, anniversary ring, or you just want a ring that looks awesome, head over to thorum.com and use promo code HISTORYDOSE to get 20% off a truly unique ring.